Hi guys, Rob from Rob's Model Cars, and today you join me for part 5 of how to build the Hobby Design LB Aventador. Now if you've watched part 4, I showed you how to grind the front bumper bar and do the extra modifications to the body to make this resin trans kit fit, and now I'm going to show you the next step. So what I've done, I have reattached the bonnet. If you watch the disassembly video, it's just opposite to that. So actually hinge the bonnet back onto the body. That's going to enable you to adequately line up the front bumper bar. Now, I showed you in the last video about grinding the underside edge here and just trimming, let me open that. Just trimming the front edge there of the bumper bar. Once the bonnet or the hood is fitted back on there, you can see that we've got a pretty good fit there. Now we only want a very small gap here between the back edge of the bumper bar and the metal hood, and that is just to allow for a little bit of paint when the body is painted and the hood is repainted, and you want a little bit of clearance there as well. So with that final sanding, you can see on the edge there, pretty close fit there. I've got a little bit of a gap at the back here on this particular body that I ground, but the flare will cover that one. That side's pretty good. And what you want to do is just keep test fitting that bumper bar when you're sanding the undersides of the front wings, because you want to end up with a flush fit here between the hood and the bumper bar. If you've got a flush fit there, your headlights will fit back into those buckets, and after the model is repainted, it will line up perfectly. So that is about the gap. I don't know whether you can see that. I'll open it up a little bit more. You want a gap a little bit less than that. I'd say about 0.5 millimeter here, between the hood and the bumper bar. So we're going to glue that on in a minute. Now the flares from Hobby Design, they have some little moulding tabs on the inside. I just use my Dremel and just cut those away, being careful not to go through the front edge of the flare. They all have them. They have one on the inside here as well, and also on the back flare as well. There's a little one on the inside here, and a little one on the inside of the arch as well. So you want to sand those off before we attach. Now I showed you in the last video about how we ground out the back edge of the wheel arch here. I'll just dry fit this Fender Flare on so you can see. That is so it can line up with the side sill there. That's what it's for, basically, for that back edge there to sit in there. So that's why we ground those out there, so you can see that. So that will actually fit flush with the side sill. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's a bit hard. And then the rear fender is pretty straightforward. You're just going to follow the body line through the side flare, which runs through the top of the side sill. They're pretty straightforward. There was no modification needed on the back, and these are basically going to line up with the body lines in the die-cast body. So you can see that crease in the back there, and that line, if we can hold it there, that line that lines up through the top of that side sill. So no modification to the die-cast body was required for those back flares, mainly just the front flares. Now you'll also notice that I've reattached the side sills on here. We need that done so that we can attach the flare extensions, because they will be glued onto the side sill there, and also it helps to line up the front flare also, which, as you can see there, it lines up with the side sill here. It actually butts into it, so we keep that on there. And that's going to be permanently fixed on there. I showed you also in the last video about grinding out these side sills here so that you can re-screw the interior pan to the model. So just make sure you've done these things before you screw the side skirts on. You can do it after the model's painted, but it's better to do this sort of work before you do any painting so that you don't damage your fresh paint work. So other than that, we're pretty much ready to go to start attaching these resin parts. Now, I found the best way to join these resin parts to the die-cast body is with a super glue. I specifically use this Bob Smith Industries Maxi Cure. Now, this pink bottle, this is an extra thick super glue. So if you've got some irregularities in the underside of the metal where the bumper bar is going to join, this will fill those small irregularities. It's not going to fill a big gap. You've got to get that. You've got to get that fit of that bumper bar really pretty good, so that you get that good bond. Otherwise, when you're handling the model, if you don't get a good bond while you're painting it, while you're reassembling it, the last thing you want is this bumper bar to actually break its glue join. That would be a bit of a disaster. So I would recommend this Bob Smith Industries Maxi Cure super glue. It's got around a 10 to 15 second grab to it, so it gives you a little bit of a chance to slide the bumper bar around to get it in its perfect position. And the good thing with this brand of super glue is that they also do a debonder. So if you get the bumper bar glued, or the flares glued in the wrong spot, or they need a slight little bit of adjustment, or you accidentally glue your fingers to the body, this actually debonds super glue. So this is a CA remover. So squirts, this is like a liquid, squirt some of this onto or underneath the part that you want to unglue, and it'll come away. So really very handy stuff to have this. And you know, these guys Bob Smith Industries make a fantastic range of super glues, and one that I use also, not for this particular job now, but for reassembly, is the Super Gold Plus. This is fantastic for clear parts like windscreens, side windows, and headlight lenses. This will not haze or fog up your clear plastic parts because it doesn't emit any fumes and no odors. So this is a fantastic product for clear parts. But we'll get to this one later on when we're finished painting the model and we're reassembling. So let's get started. So what I want to do, I use a bit of masking tape just to basically hold the bonnet in place. Even though the bonnet is screwed into position, there is a little bit of movement in this with the Auto Art hinges. So I just want to put a bit of tape on here, and it just holds the bonnet in place to the front wings. That way I know that when I glue this front bumper bar on, it's going to be in exactly the right place. Now, another reason why I screwed the side sills on now is that when the front bumper bar is sitting underneath and you sit it on your bench, it's perfectly flat and the bumper bar is sitting level. So that way, I'll try and explain it that way, with a straight edge. When the side sills are on here, this is perfectly flush through here. So when I glue this bumper bar on, I let it sit flat on my bench, and that way I can line up this gap through here and put a bit of pressure on the side wings either side to get a good glue bond. So we'll make a start with this. I don't put a massive amount of glue because you don't want glue running around everywhere. And what you want to do is, I'll actually glue the body. So you actually want to put glue on these sections here. And I'll just spread it around a little bit with the nozzle. As I say, this is an extra thick super glue. so it gives you a little bit more opportunity to get a good bond. A little bit of spread there. I'll put a little bit on the sides of the bumper bar as well, not too much. I'll put it towards the inside, just so when it squeezes, it doesn't come oozing all out the side. Now, as I say, keep that on your bench and basically line it up. Now, as I say, allow about a mil, not a mil, about half a mil, 3/4 of a millimeter, like so. Just got to slide that back a little bit, just so that you're allowing for the paint thickness. I tend to go a bit heavy on my clear coat, so I like to allow a little bit more, and that's basically it. You can feel it's flush on the sides. Now I'll just put a bit of pressure on that for 10-15 seconds, just to let that super glue grab. And this, you don't want to rush this process, just let the super glue do its work and it will sit in its place. That's why I like to put the masking tape on the sides here, because there is a center crease through the middle of the bonnet that runs through the middle of the resin front bumper bar as well. So you pretty much just line up this body shape to the bumper bar. It's a pretty good fit. Now that's grabbed enough, so you can actually see now with that positioning there that the arch lines up perfectly through here, both sides. That's another telltale that it's lined up in the right spot. And with a close-up there, you can actually see that gap that I've left there. So I've left about 3/4 of a millimeter. I'm not sure what that is in imperial, in inches. Maybe a 1/16 of an inch. I'm not sure about that. I'm in Australia, so we use metric here. So I'd say about 3/4 of a millimeter. And you can see that crease line through the middle of the hood that actually lines up and runs through that bumper bar as well. So that's pretty much all you have to do to glue the front bumper bar on. The LB Aventadors that I've built before that, I've done these all the same way, and I've had no issues actually dropping the headlights back into the headlight buckets. So that's pretty much the front bumper bar. Now I'm just going to let that sit for another sort of 10-15 minutes. Just make sure that bond hardens up before I start and attach the flares, and then I'll show you how to attach the side flares. We don't need that tape on there anymore, so we can take that off, and even with the tape removed, you can see that gap is still how you want it to be through there. So let that dry for a minute, and then I'll show you how to glue the side flares on. Okay guys, so now that's dried for around 10 minutes or so, and now we'll start to attach the side flares. Now these again will line up with the side sill at the bottom here, and also follow this shape where the door goes in. Now you want to leave a little bit of a gap, so the flare doesn't go right to the edge of the die cast. It sits back just a little bit, and the front of the flare will actually line up with the crease in the resin bumper bar through here. So that is pretty much going to determine the position of it. So I'll put some glue on the back of this flare, and then I will actually put this into position and make sure I line up this front edge here. These resin kits are really good fit to the actual metal fender here, so you shouldn't have any gaps there. Main priority here is to actually hold it when the glue's applied, hold it on the back here, and line up. This is the crucial part, really. You really want to line up this body crease line through here. So it's the same situation. You don't want to stick your fingers together, so Don't go crazy with the glue, but you do want a good amount of glue on there to stick. So I put more on the inside following the wheel arch than on the outside, because you don't want all that glue oozing out, because you'll have to sand some of that off, otherwise it'll show under the paint. So we run some down the back of that, the back of the flare as well. That should be enough. Again, just watch you don't stick your fingers together. I've done it before. It's not good. And then stick it on the back of the sill first, leaving that little bit of a gap so it fits tight at the sill, and then line up that body crease with the bumper bar, if you can see that through there. So that's lined up, and then I'm just putting my fingers on there just to try and spread the weight of the glue join. And this glue is really strong, so if you get it in the right spot, you'll get a really good adhesion to the metal, and it'll never come off. So that's sort of started to grab onto the metal already. Just keep holding it there for a little bit longer, just to make sure it's got a good glue bond. And that's basically it. So now you can see on the inside here, we're lined up with the inner wheel well. This crease line through the flare lines up perfectly with the Hobby Design front bumper bar. You've got no gap behind the flare. It follows the die-cast body very well. These are brilliant, these kits for fit. And you can also see here, very, very small gap here, but pretty much flush. And the inside here lines up with the side sill as well. And that's basically how you glue the front flare onto the body. And now we've just got to repeat that process on this side. Always just dry fit the part first, just to make sure that there's no issues or something you've forgotten. So there you can see there, I've just sitting that on dry fitting, make sure it lines up before I actually attach the glue. So we'll do the same as we did before. We'll just apply more glue on the inside, following the wheel arch rather than the outside of the flare, because it'll squish out onto the body. And just use the nozzle of the bottle just to move the glue around. Not too much on that back section there. And then again, just start with the back where the flare meets the side sill, and then just adjust the front. And just check before you put too much pressure that it's lined up. That's pretty good. And again, good fit over the top. And just hold that for 10 or 15 seconds as well with your fingers. Just give it a bit of a squeeze, just so if there's any air bubbles in there, you can squeeze that out. As I say, you get a really good fit, as you can see there. You can see how tight that is to the bumper bar, the flare. Again, how tightly it fits the die-cast body. And that's basically how you want it to line up, just with your side sill at the front there. It does overhang a little bit, but if you push that further back, yeah, you're going to have issues. The flare will come past the opening where the door sits here, and you will have some issues with door clearance. So that is the bumper bar and both front flares fitted onto our modified die-cast body. So now we're starting to get the idea here. Now the rear flares are exactly the same. Just dry fit them first. As I mentioned before, you've got this body line which runs through here, and it's the actual join of the side sill to the die-cast body. And you've also got this crease line here on the back of the wing. So they're your two lines that you want to line up. It does exactly follow the inside wheel arch through here. And so same thing, I'll just basically hold the part point to point with my finger, and then using the Bob Smith Industries glue, I will spread that around. Spread around with a nozzle, using less glue as you get to the outside. But there's a lot more resin in this flare compared to the front one, so use a bit more glue and then just spread that around. You can always add a little bit more glue with a toothpick if you've missed a spot or it hasn't stuck down properly. So I position this one first, making sure it lines up with the fenders. Now that's lining up with that crease line in the body there, and also lining up with that crease line in the back of the body. Again, just use your fingers, spread a bit of weight just to get a good bond. Once you do put pressure on this using this Bob Smith glue, it does go off very quick, and that's really all I need to do to get that stick. Now again, you can see the fitment here. There's really no gap behind here. It's a really good fit. I'll just squeeze that there, just close that up. And the front of this LB flare sits right up against where this vent piece, which will be painted black, is right on that joiner there, which lines up with the inside of the flare here. Really very good fit. So that's a rear flare. That's a rear flare attached to the body. So we'll do the same on the other side. This is the last flare to attach. As I said, you can see that there is a little line in the die cast there. This is the black part of the vent that's painted. This flare lines right up to that line there, as you can see. So what we do, we'll just dry fit it again. Make sure that you've done everything you need to do to get that to fit snugly against the die cast body. And then we'll apply the glue to this one as well. So just same process. Don't squeeze your glue bottle too hard and have a big pile of glue come out and glue your fingers together. But you've always keep the bottle of debonder close, so that if you do stick your fingers to the body or the part, you can squirt that on there and it will actually release. Better than cutting your skin off, as they'll do at the doctor. So as you can see, that should be enough glue on there. I'm going to hold this into position. Line up that front one first, right behind the side seal. Line up that body line through there, and then just adjust the back. And that lines perfectly up again with the flare, with the wheel arch. Put some pressure on there, just to get a good bond. Now, I don't know whether you can see that on camera, but I've put a little bit more glue on there, and a little bit more glue is squeezed out between the top of the resin flare and the die cast body. But that can actually be sanded off at a later stage. Or you can use a piece of card and just run that around while the glue's still wet. I'll just run that through there. I'm using just an old business card, and that's just scraping the glue off. And that is your other rear fender glued on. So not too hard if you've used super glue or you've built some model kits before, and you're used to using glues. That's not a real big issue, but that's basically how easy it is to fit the resin kit to this AVENTADOR body. Now, as you would have seen, most of the work was in the last video, which was cutting all the die cast to make this fit. Once you've done that, this is really easy to fit this body. Now, there is one more part, which is the rear wing center panel. So this is actually goes in between the tail lights, this panel, and this has got a couple of slots in it for the legs of the huge GT wing that comes with the kit. Now that will actually just glue on. Oops, got that upside down. So that will actually fit in between the tail lights. Now that's a perfect fit as well. This also had a couple of little resin lugs, molding lugs on the back of it. I just used my Dremel with a sanding disc just to grind those out, just so it's flush on the back, otherwise it won't sit tight to the body. And that actually just fits flush with the die cast either side, and that's what will support the legs of the big GT wing that sits on the back. Now on this particular model, because I'm building a Roadster, I'm actually going to use a different style of wing on this model. I'm actually going to use the DMC style wing. So I'm not going to use the GT wing on this model. But if you're building this LB Aventador in the coupe and you want to use the big wing, it's the same process. Just apply some super glue to the back of this piece and actually just, actually just stick it on. So same process, just make sure you line it up that it's center either side. As you can see there, the tail light stops either side of it, so it's pretty hard to glue that out of position. So glue that on as well if you're building the coupe or the Roadster. If you want to use the GT wing, glue this piece on at this stage as well. But as I said, I'm not going to use that wing, so I'm not going to glue this piece on. So that's basically it for the fitting of the Hobby Design LB Aventador resin kit. Now this is nearly ready for paint. There's one more thing that you need to do, and we'll go through that in a minute. I'll just let these parts go a bit harder with the super glue, and then I'll show you the one last thing that you have to do to get this ready for paint. Okay, so as I discussed, there's one more thing that you need to do before this is ready to paint. Now there's only one issue that I have with these Hobby Design kit, or one fault with the kit, and that is that the bumper bar here is a little bit narrower than the actual die-cast body. So I'm going to try and show you this. It's a bit hard to pick that up on camera, but maybe there. So here, the actual metal body here sticks out past this part. So from the flare here forward, the resin bumper bar is sitting behind this edge of the metal. Once you glue yours on, you'll see what I mean by that. I'm not sure whether you can actually pick that up with the camera. And it's like that both sides. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can see it there. Now, it's pretty hard to tell on camera, but there's actually, the metal part is sticking past the resin. So what I do with these ones, and what I've done with the past ones, is I've used some Tamiya putty, some white putty, and I've actually just applied some putty between this crease line, where are we? This crease line on the bumper bar up to the metal, just to blend that together to make that flush. So before we do that, I'll use some masking tape, because these Hobby Design flares have some very fine detail, this line, and also the little rivets as well. So what I want to do is I want to cover that up so I don't get any putty in there at all, and just run that behind there as well, and that'll just protect from getting any putty into that edge of the flare. I'm not sure whether you can see that still. Maybe there you can. So we'll do that both sides, because yeah, if you put putty on there and you've got to get rid of the putty and you have to sand that off, you're going to sand those little rivets off and also fill that body line as well, and you don't want to do that. That's the great thing about these hobby design kits, they've got great detail. So that tape's there just to protect against the putty going in there. So I've just got some little modeller's spatulas. You can use these for pottery and all sorts of things. I got those very cheap on eBay, like a set of 10 of them. And they're actually really quite useful. So what I'll do, I'll just use an old business card. I'll put a bit of putty on the business card. And then put some onto my knife. Not too much. And then I'm just going to fill that in. Now you might have to do this in 2 applications. Let the first coat dry. It does shrink a little bit, but that's basically filling in that little gap. So I'll do the same on this one as well. And once that Tamiya putty dries, you can just give that a sand and that will work. So that's really all you have to do with that one. It's only a small little modification that you have to make, but it's definitely one, when the model's finished, makes a big difference. That excess will come off. You can use just a sandpaper, that'll take that off. So that's what I filled in there. So it's just from the front of the flare, just to fill in that gap where the die-cast body meets the resin bumper bar. So I've just done that on both sides. So I'll actually let that dry, and then I'll use some very fine sandpaper and I'll leave the masking tape on and I'll sand that off. And then once you've done that, it's actually ready to prime, to put some paint primer undercoat on the body. I'll just use a wax and grease remover first on a rag, and I'll take any of the oil of my fingers off the metal, and then I'll mount this onto a stand and we'll paint it. Now I've done a video on how I paint my models using a spray gun. You can, if you're only used to spray cans, you can paint this with your spray can, that's not a problem. But that's the next stage. So the next video I'll actually have this painted, and then we'll talk about applying decals and actually sealing decals under a clear coat, and then we'll move on to other things like the assembly of the Hobby Design 4G Arto wheels. We'll move on to how you airbrush the tyre letters onto the tyres, and then we'll look at some reassembling tips and tricks as well. So hopefully you guys have been anticipating this part 5, so hopefully that shows you actually how easy it is now to fit the Hobby Design resin kit to the modified die-cast body. That is all the hard work done now. So enjoy painting your model, and stay tuned for the next video where this model will be painted. You'll see what colour I've decided on in the next video. It should look pretty good, I think. And yeah, we'll keep moving on with the series. So thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. I've got a heap of new models on pre-order. They'll be here soon with some more fresh model reviews. And we've also got another project that we're going to start. We're going to show you how to pull apart a Signature Series Burago Ferrari 488 and do some modifications and a full repaint on that model as well. So stay tuned, plenty more how-to videos to come. But that's it today for part 5 of how to build the Hobby Design LB Performance Aventador. So catch you next time. Thanks guys.